Jake Harrington stood on his back porch, arms folded and a fresh glass of iced tea sweating in his grip. The Arizona heat scorched the landscape like an open oven, but his brand new in-ground pool shimmered with promise. After 3 long months of construction, delays, and budget battles with contractors, it was finally done. A personal slice of paradise. Sparkling water, stone decking, Bluetooth-controlled lights, even a waterfall feature. It was perfect. Jake, a 39-year-old remote tech consultant, had planned this retreat to escape the constant grind. With his wife Lana working long school days and their twins off at summer camp, this was his time to breathe. Just peace, solitude, and an occasional cannonball into cool water. But peace didn't last long in Willow Glen Estates, especially when the Hoa was involved. It started innocently. Jake came out one morning with his towel and sunscreen, only to stop dead in his tracks. There, reclining on one of his brand new deck chairs in a leopard print bikini, was a woman he'd never seen up close before. She was sipping from a wine tumbler like she owned the place. "Morning," she chirped, waving with perfectly manicured fingers. "Hope you don't mind. It's just so hot today." Jake blinked. I'm sorry. "Who are you?" She smiled like he'd just complimented her earrings. Karen Mitchell, president of the Hoa." Jake's jaw clenched. He'd heard whispers. Karen was notorious around the neighborhood. The kind of woman who measured lawns with a ruler and fined people for patriotic flag placements. But this, "You just walked into my backyard and got in my pool." She laughed lightly, as if he was joking. "Technically, this side of your yard is within the HOAS community easement zone, shared access under the revised charter. Page 32, subsection F." Jake stared at her. He had read the Hoa handbook when they moved. And there was no such thing. Karen stretched and dipped her toes in the water. "You should really attend more meetings. You'd know these things." Something inside Jake began to boil hotter than the July sun. He turned and went back inside. Lana was in the kitchen, and when he told her what just happened, her first reaction was silence. Then she set down her coffee mug. "She just walked into our pool." Jake nodded. "Claimed some fake rule about community access, like it's a hotel amenity. I'm calling the board." "You think they'll care?" "She is." "The board?" Lana frowned. "Then we handle it ourselves." Jake spent the rest of the day installing a basic security camera, pointed directly at the pool entrance. No confrontation. No drama. Just documentation. That was his style. But the next day, Karen was back. This time with a friend. To wine glasses. Loud music. Wet footprints across the tile. Jake had sealed himself. This wasn't just a wet time dip. It was a declaration. And Jake wasn't about to let it slide. Jake didn't sleep much that night. The footage was clear. Karen Mitchell, Hoa president and self-declared queen of Willow Glen Estates, had entered his backyard again, this time with a friend named Leslie. Both of them cackling like they were at a beach resort. His security cam picked up the music, the splash of drinks being poured. Even the moment Leslie dropped her wine tumbler into the pool and dove in after it, fully clothed. Jake watched it all from his laptop, fists clenched, teeth grinding. Lana sat beside him, eyes narrowed. "This is trespassing," she muttered. "She thinks she's above the law," Jake said. "And the rules." He turned off the screen. Time to read every line of that Hoa handbook. By sunrise, Jake had gone through every document they received when they moved in 2 years ago. Not one mention of a shared water feature. No community easement clause. Nothing remotely close to the nonsense Karen spouted. What she'd done wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a fabrication, and that meant she'd done this before. Probably to others. Lana left for school, fuming. Jake stayed behind, calling the local precinct. The officer on the line was polite, but non-committal. Best bet's a civil complaint. The officer said, if you've got footage, file a trespass report with the HOA. Jake nearly laughed. She is the HOA. Well, the officer said, voice lowering. In that case, start documenting everything. You might need it later. Jake hung up and turned to his next move. Upgrades. By the end of the day, Jake had installed a full 8-camera setup, mounted a lockable gate at the rear fence, and programmed a smart alarm system to ping his phone if motion was detected near the pool. It wasn't Fort Knox, but it'd do for now. But Karen wasn't done. The next morning, Jake stepped outside to water the plants. He froze. The pool was filled with floaties, flamingos, unicorns, a massive inflatable wine bottle, a half-eaten charcuterie board sat by the stairs surrounded by damp towels. Karen's glitter-covered slippers were still there. Jake's phone buzzed. A new email, notice of non-compliance, harassment of HOA president, and denial of communal access. He opened the attachment. Karen had filed a formal violation against him. The nerve. Jake paced in circles, heart racing. He wasn't a hothead, but this was war. If she wanted to twist the rules, fine. He'd twist back. Only this time, he'd use real rules. Ones she couldn't bend. That evening, Jake attended the monthly HOA meeting. He hadn't been to one since moving in. Like most people, he thought they were boring, routine affairs. Not. This one. Karen stood at the front of the community center like a politician. Her clipboard was loaded, her smile even more artificial than usual. Jake waited until open floor comments. I'd like clarification on the HOA's position about pool access, he said, calm and direct, specifically regarding private property. Karen's smile stiffened. Of course. The HOA has always maintained flexibility when it comes to shared neighborhood experiences. And Jake held up a copy of the bylaws. Actually, the HOA charter defines all backyard spaces as private. There is no clause permitting access to private pools, and no mention of easement sharing. I have documentation and timestamps of repeated uninvited entry, which constitutes trespassing. The room shifted. A few heads turned. One board member frowned. Karen cleared her throat. Well, the bylaws are open to interpretation, and no, they're not. Jake cut in. Unless you rewrote them without a community vote. In which case, we have a bigger problem. Murmurs spread. The board exchanged glances. Jake didn't push further. He didn't have to. Karen glared at him as the meeting ended. You're being very unneighborly. Jake stared right back. You swam in my pool without permission. That's not neighborly either. He walked out. But as he approached his truck, he noticed something odd. A damp towel, freshly laid over his windshield. Jake scanned the parking lot. Karen was sitting in her car, staring at him, sipping wine from a stainless tumbler, and smiling. By the time Saturday rolled around, Jake thought maybe, just maybe, Karen had gotten the message. The cameras, the confrontation at the HOA meeting, and the formal citation for trespassing he emailed her through a lawyer friend should have been enough to keep her out of his backyard forever. But if Jake had learned anything, it was that hoakaren didn't back down. Not when she was wrong. And especially not when she felt challenged. Jake was elbow deep in a Home Depot box, unpacking LED deck lights, when he heard the music. It started softly, an 80s synth-pop beat drifting from somewhere nearby. Then it got louder, much louder. Jake stepped out back and froze. His heart dropped. There were balloons, streamers, and 30 people in his backyard. 30 teenagers, couples, toddlers. People from the neighborhood he barely knew. Coolers of hard seltzer and boxed wine were lined along the edge of the pool. Someone had dragged over a folding table for snacks. There was even a DJ set up a Bluetooth speaker with a live playlist running from someone's phone. In the middle of it all, soaking wet in a wide-brimmed sun hat, sat Karen Mitchell in her signature lawn chair. Jake's lawn chair. She waved when she saw him, lifting a plastic cup. "You made it." Jake stormed across the yard. "What the hell is this?" Karen smiled sweetly. "Community engagement. This is our annual summer blog mixer. And you were kind enough to host." Jake looked around in disbelief. "I didn't agree to any of this. This is my property." Karen's smile didn't budge. "It's for the neighborhood, Jake. You said it yourself, these people barely know each other. I'm just helping bring us all together." He gestured toward the pool. "There are kids in there. Someone's going to get hurt. Well, maybe you should have installed a safety gate. But don't worry, I brought pool noodles." Jake's blood was boiling. He walked back inside, fists clenched, and grabbed his phone. The cops would take this seriously now, right? He dialed the non-emergency line, but the dispatcher told him again. It was a civil matter, and since he hadn't physically removed anyone, law enforcement couldn't intervene. He hung up and stood at the kitchen window, watching some man double-dip tortilla chips into his guacamole. Enough was enough. Jake stepped outside and pulled the breaker for the pool pump. The waterfall feature stopped. The music cut off till he'd rigged the outdoor speakers through the same outlet. Everyone paused. The party froze. Then Jake spoke, calmly but loudly. "This is private property. You're all trespassing. You have 10 minutes to leave, or I'll start pressing charges and releasing video footage." Someone laughed nervously. A few neighbors murmured apologies and gathered their things. Karen stood up, soaked from the waist down. "You're embarrassing yourself, Jake." "No, Karen," Jake said, holding up his phone. "You are. And now I've got every face here on security cam." She looked around, seeing the stairs now turning toward her. Jake added, "And by the way, that water you're floating in, I just shocked it yesterday. Low voltage pest deterrent system. Perfectly legal. Might want to towel off." Karen's eyes widened slightly. She stepped back like the water had turned into acid. Whether it was true or not didn't matter. Suddenly, no one wanted to be in the pool anymore. People scattered fast. 15 minutes later, Jake's yard was trashed. Half-eaten cupcakes, trampled grass, crushed beer cans. But the pool was empty. Silent. Karen stood by the gate, arms crossed. "You'll regret embarrassing me like that." Jake tilted his head. "No, I think I'm just getting started." The aftermath of Karen's blog mixer looked like a hurricane had swept through Jake's backyard. The once flawless landscaping was trampled, snack debris floated lazily in the pool, and several of Jake's decorative lights had been ripped clean out of the ground. Jake stared out over the chaos with a strange sense of calm, because now it wasn't just personal, it was war. Lana came home that night to find Jake deep into his laptop, tabs open for private security, motion sensors, and low-voltage deterrent systems. She crossed her arms, eyebrows raised. "Tell me you're not electrifying the pool." Jake didn't even look up. "It's not what it sounds like. I'm installing a legal low-voltage perimeter system around the coping edge. It's the same kind of system used for raccoons and deer. Harmless, but definitely startling." Lana hesitated, then slowly nodded. "Honestly, I'm in." Jake spent the next 48 hours upgrading every inch of his backyard. He added high-frequency sound deterrents, connected the motion cameras to his smart speakers, and lined the pool's outer edge with pressure-sensitive pads rigged to a high-pitched alarm. But the final touch, the low-voltage current he integrated beneath the stone border. A legal installation that delivered a subtle but sharp static jolt when touched barefoot. Jake tested it himself. It worked. A buzz strong enough to make you jump, but not enough to cause harm. On the third day, at exactly 4:17 p.m., his phone buzzed. Motion detected. Jake pulled up the live feed. There she was, Karen, stepping carefully through the side gate, eyes darting left and right. She looked like she was on a covert mission. She didn't see the new sensor above the pergola, or the camera now embedded in the planter. She approached the pool slowly, removed her sandals, and sat down to dip her toes into the water. She leaned back and sighed. Then she reached her hand to the edge and touched the new stone trim. Zzz. Karen yelped and recoiled so fast she nearly fell in. She leapt to her feet, shaking her hand, spinning around like she'd just been stung by a wasp. Her sunglasses flew off her face into the water. She kicked them, tried to grab them, and slipped, tumbling straight into the pool with a splash. Jake burst out laughing. He couldn't help it. He replayed the footage in slow motion, frame by glorious frame. Then he sent a copy to Lana with the caption, "Shockingly effective." But Karen wasn't done. Later that night, Jake heard a knock at the door. Two uniformed officers stood outside. "Mr. Harrington?" The taller one asked. "That's me," Jake said. "We're here in response to an assault allegation. A Miss Karen Mitchell claims she was electrocuted in your backyard." Jake blinked. "You're kidding." "No, sir. She says you set up a trap. We'll need to ask you a few questions." Jake invited them in and showed them the footage. Karen entering uninvited, the clear signs warning of electronic deterrence, the product manual, the code-compliant voltage level, and even the model number with legal certifications. The officers watched, expressionless. When the video reached the part where Karen slipped into the pool, the younger officer chuckled before coughing to cover it up. "Looks like you took appropriate precautions," the older one said. "It's your property. We'll file a report, but I doubt anything will come of it." Jake followed them to the door. "What about the trespassing?" "Already noted. But unless you press charges or get a restraining order, it's still a civil issue." As the patrol car pulled away, Jake turned back toward the house. His camera feed lit up again. Karen, dripping wet and furious, was pacing across her own driveway, glaring at his window. And Jake, he was just getting warmed up. Jake wasn't a petty man. He didn't go looking for fights. But ever since Karen Mitchell made herself comfortable in his pool, she had stirred up something he couldn't ignore. And now that she tried to get him arrested over a legal deterrent system, that was the final straw. Karen had poked the wrong bear. Jake sat in his home office, poring over every file, form, and scanned HOA document he could find. He'd requested the HOA's public records under Arizona's Open Community Access Law, and received a packet of files 2 inches thick. He flipped through pages of financial reports, annual meeting minutes, architectural approvals. But what really caught his eye was the charter document, or lack of one. Jake squinted. According to the copy they'd received when buying the house, Willow Glen Estates HOA was originally founded in 1998. The charter had an expiration clause 25 years unless renewed by vote and legal registration. It was now 20-5. Jake leaned back in his chair, breath catching. The charter had expired last year. No renewal vote. No notarized refiling with the county. Jake double-checked with the state HOA registry database and sure enough, Willow Glen Estates Homeowners Association wasn't listed as active, which meant the HOA was technically dead, and Karen Mitchell had been enforcing fines, rules, and her own authority without any legal standing. Jake grinned. He picked up the phone and called Lana. "Guess what?" he said. "Karen's Hoa is a ghost." Lana gasped. "You're joking." "Not even a little." Jake took screenshots, printed documents, and compiled a neat binder. Then he called for a special community meeting. According to the now-defunct rules, any resident could request one. Karen wasn't going to like it, but it didn't matter. She no longer had the power she thought she did. That Friday, Jake booked the local library's conference room. He emailed the invite to the entire neighborhood using the old Hoa contact list, and dropped physical flyers on doorsteps just in case Karen tried to intercept it. On the day of the meeting, Jake arrived early. He wore a button-down shirt and brought donuts, classic PR tactics. By 6:45 p.m., more than 24 neighbors had shown up. At 6:59 p.m., Karen walked in like a storm cloud, clipboard in hand. Lips pursed, she marched straight to the front and addressed the room. "Everyone, this meeting is not sanctioned." The Hoa did not approve it. Jake calmly stepped forward. "Actually, Karen, it doesn't have to be, because as of now, the Hoa doesn't exist." Gasps rippled through the room. Karen's eyes narrowed. "That's a lie." Jake held up the binder. According to state records, Willow Glen Estates failed to renew its charter in 2023. No vote was held. No legal filing submitted. That means all operations enforcement, dues, fines, inspections have been conducted under a false assumption of authority. Karen tried to speak, but Jake continued. And to make matters worse, several line items on last year's financial summary don't add up. Over $3,800 was spent on landscaping consulting that wasn't voted on by residents. He flipped the page, pointing to a photograph, which just so happens to match the new koi pond installed behind Karen's house. Murmurs became outraged. Karen flushed. That pond was donated. It was for beautification, no vote, no budget approval, no receipts. That's embezzlement. Someone stood up in the back. "So, what now?" Jake nodded. "We hold a neighborhood vote. Either we refile the whole legally, with a new board without Karen, or we dissolve it entirely." Karen turned to the room, visibly rattled. "You're letting him divide us. He's dangerous. He electrified his pool." Jake stood calmly. "And you trespassed on private property repeatedly." The vote was held that night, right there in the room. It wasn't even close. 27-3. The Hoa was dissolved. Karen stormed out before the count was finished, slamming the glass door behind her. Jake watched her go. But something in her face chilled him. Not defeat, not shame. Something colder. Like this wasn't over. For 3 days, the neighborhood was peaceful. The vote had dissolved the Hoa. Jake mowed his lawn without measuring lines. Neighbors painted fences, added garden gnomes, and dared to park their RVs overnight. For the first time in years, Willow Glen Estates felt like a community, not a prison camp patrolled by an angry blonde in wedge heels. But Jake wasn't naive. He knew Karen wouldn't slink away quietly. People like her didn't surrender. They retaliated. And right on cue, the retaliation came. On Thursday morning, Jake stepped outside to find 2 men in black uniforms parked across his driveway, in a black SUV. One had a clipboard. The other had a badge. The words "Private Neighborhood Security" were plastered across their chests. "Can I help you?" Jake asked, eyeing the tinted windows. The man with the clipboard smiled. "We've been hired by the Willow Glen Safety Council to monitor neighborhood activity." Jake blinked. "The what?" The man pointed across the street. Karen stood at her porch, arms folded, glaring like a hawk. A sign on her lawn read, "Neighborhood Security Initiative, Keeping Willow Glen Safe." Jake chuckled bitterly. "You Mean the hoa that doesn't exist. The guard didn't respond. Instead, he pulled out a form and handed it over. We're here to observe, not enforce. Just documenting any suspicious activity for the council's weekly reports. Jake looked at the form. Karen's name was listed at the bottom as Chair of Safety Oversight. Unbelievable. Jake snapped a picture of the form, then walked back inside. Lana, now on summer break, was making coffee. Jake dropped the form on the table. She's trying to create her own hoa. Just renamed it. Lana squinted. This woman has a god complex. Jake grinned. Good news is she's breaking about 6 laws. By afternoon, the guards were walking up and down the street, taking notes. Jake noticed them peer over fences, look through hedges, even snap a photo of his solar lights. That's when he made his move. Jake called the city's zoning office. The officer on the line listened patiently, then confirmed it. Karen hadn't registered any business, nonprofit, or safety program, and according to state law, private security firms were required to register through the state board. Jake got to work. He sent anonymous tips to the licensing board, the state attorney general's office, and a friendly local journalist who loved neighborhood scandal pieces. He also uploaded body cam style footage from his security cams showing the patrols peeking over fences. But that wasn't the only grenade Karen tossed. 2 days later, a police cruiser rolled up. Jake answered the door. The officer removed his sunglasses. We had a report of an electrocution incident on your property. Jake sighed. Again? Caller says she was shocked and injured near your pool. Jake invited the officer in and showed him the footage again. The same incident. The same harmless deterrent system. The same wet towel act. But this time Karen had brought receipts. The officer held up a medical report. She went to there. Claims nerve damage in her hand. Jake raised an eyebrow. Then why didn't she file this 3 weeks ago? No idea. But she's also filed a personal injury lawsuit. Jake's jaw clenched. That night, he reviewed his camera footage again, piece by piece, just looking for missed detail. And that's when he found it. Karen, standing outside her house at 3:12 a.m., pouring something from a bottle into a towel, wrapping it around her hand, then filming herself reacting in pain. It was all staged. The next morning, Jake uploaded the video to a private YouTube channel and emailed the link to the officer and his attorney. 2 hours later, he got a call. Yeah, we're dropping the report. And you might want to forward that video to Karen's workplace because faking injuries, that's not just petty, it's fraud. Jake paused. Wait, where does she work? County Procurement Office. Jake's eyes widened. Government. Job. Yep. With a conduct clause. Jake thanked him and hung up, already typing by sunset. Karen's viral meltdown was quietly circulating among her coworkers. And Jake? He was just getting started. Jake thought it would be over by now. He had exposed Karen's fake hoa. He dismantled her bogus neighborhood safety council and her fake injury claim, destroyed by her own camera footage. Yet somehow, Karen Mitchell still acted like she was mayor of the cold-d-sac. But this time, she'd miscalculated something big. Her job. The morning after the fraud towel video made its quiet rounds online, Jake received a message from someone he didn't know, Christine R., who claimed to work at the Maricopa County Procurement Office, where Karen held a supervisory role. The message was simple. Your video was brought up in a staff meeting. She's under internal review. Lana nearly choked on her cereal when Jake read it aloud. She could actually lose her job, she asked. Jake nodded. Government rules have ethics clauses. Faking an injury to frame a neighbor. That's career-ending. Lana blinked. She started this over a pool. Jake smirked. And she might drown in it. But Karen wasn't done gasping for air. With her legal options drying up and her power gone, she decided to go full scorched earth. Flyers began appearing on front doors across the neighborhood. Grainy black and white printouts titled exposing Jake Harrington with laughably doctored photos. One showing Jake in front of a mansion with a gold chain photoshopped around his neck. Another claimed he had installed military-grade, weaponized electric fencing around his pole. Jake pulled one off a neighbor's mailbox and burst into laughter. They used Comic Sans for the headline, he said. This is amazing. But it wasn't funny for long. Later that afternoon, Jake got an email from his homeowner's insurance provider. Karen had filed a formal complaint claiming his backyard contained hazardous electrical installations and presented a danger to the neighborhood. They were now reviewing his policy. Jake's hands trembled on the keyboard. She was trying to nuke him financially. He called his attorney, Alan Kessler, who'd been helping with the Hoa battle. She's doubling down. Jake told him, even with everything we've got on her, Alan sighed. Then it's time to go nuclear. Jake had tried to keep things civil, but if she wanted a war, he'd give her one. With Alan's help, Jake filed for a defamation suit and harassment restraining order. He included the fake injury stunt, security footage, emails, and photos of the flyer campaign. It was enough to open a court case. But before the paperwork even made it to Karen's mailbox, something happened. Jake was sitting on his porch when a Channel 4 News van pulled up across the street. Two reporters knocked on Karen's door. She answered. Live cameras caught it all, Karen arguing, slamming the door, and then storming back outside, ranting about neighborhood terrorists and people wiring shock traps around swimming pools. The reporters didn't buy it. The story aired that evening as part of their local disputes gone wild segment. With Jake's footage included. By the following morning, Karen's face was trending on social media. #ShockPoolKaren was born. It only got worse. Jake got another email from Christine R. She's been placed on unpaid leave pending termination. She went on a screaming rant in the break room. Karen had lost her job, her power, her reputation. Jake figured that was the end of it, until he got the notice. In a last-ditch move, Karen had submitted a petition to form a new HOA called Willow Glen Homeowners for Safety and Standards. She needed just 15 signatures to force a community-wide vote, and somehow she got them. Jake stood at his mailbox reading the official ballot, jaw tight. She's trying to rebuild the Hoa, he said to Lana. Only this time, she's locking US out. The vote was scheduled for the following Saturday at the community clubhouse. Jake didn't hesitate. He printed full-color packets with screenshots, timestamps, receipts, and city code violations. He even printed the meme of Karen in the pool with the caption, "Rules don't apply to me." Saturday morning came. Jake walked into the clubhouse with Lana at his side and a stack of evidence under his arm. Karen stood at the front like a preacher at a pulpit. Jake waited for her to finish speaking, then stood up. He laid out everything. The expired charter, the fake safety patrols, the fake injury report, the job loss, the flyers, the news clip, and finally, the restraining order. By the end, neighbors looked stunned. One woman near the front just whispered, "Wow." When it came time to vote, the result wasn't even close. 3-4 to 1. The new HOA was denied. Karen didn't stick around for the count. She left halfway through, head down, jaw clenched, her reign finally broken. Or so it seemed. Jake thought it was over. The second Hoa had been crushed. Karen's flyers, her fake lawsuits, and even her made-up safety patrol had all collapsed. like a house of cards under the weight of her own delusions. The neighborhood had finally turned on her. Jake had won, but with Karen Mitchell, nothing was ever that simple. A week after the failed vote, Jake's security system lit up again. It was just past midnight. The feed from his backyard camera flickered, then cleared, revealing a figure in black creeping along the side fence. No mask, just a hoodie, gloves, and unmistakable platinum blonde hair. Karen. Jake watched in disbelief as she scaled the side gate, flashlight in hand, stepping carefully along the stones near the pool. She looked around like a cartoon burglar, then knelt by the water's edge. He switched to microphone mode. "Karen, what do you think you're doing?" She jumped, like she'd been tasered. The light hit her face. Makeup smeared. Wild eyes. "You think you've won," she shouted. "This isn't over. This was my neighborhood. I built this place." Jake stayed calm. "You're trespassing again. That camera is recording. Walk away now, or I call the police." But Karen didn't move. Instead, she pulled a bottle from her jacket and began unscrewing the cap. Jake froze. "Was that gasoline?" Lana came rushing into the room. "Is she holding?" "Yeah," Jake muttered, already on the phone with 911. "She's about to light something." But before Karen could pour a drop, she slipped. Her foot hit the slick edge of the coping stone, and she pitched forward, arms flailing, splash right into the pool. Again, the camera caught the bottle flying out of her hand and skidding harmlessly across the deck. Jake blinked. That woman really needs swim lessons. Within 5 minutes, red and blue lights filled the yard. Karen flailed in the pool, yelling for help, crying that Jake had booby-trapped it again. But this time, the cops weren't having it. They pulled her out, cuffed her, and sat her, sopping wet on the edge of the curb like a soggy sandwich. Jake handed over the security footage. "Now, she didn't fall into anything electric," he said to the officer. "She just slipped, again. Like last time. She must love that pool." Karen was arrested that night for trespassing, attempted vandalism, and violating a restraining order. But the twist came days later, when Jake's lawyer called with surprising. "Jake, you're gonna want to sit down," Alan said. "Karen's property, it has a lien on it, from when she used HOA funds for her koi pond. Since the HOAS legally dissolved, the lien transfers to the neighborhood." Jake frowned. "Wait, you're saying she owes you?" "Technically, she owes all of you. And if she can't pay," Jake's eyes widened, "they can force a sale. She's being evicted." Jake. Karen Mitchell was officially removed. From Willow Glen Estates, neighbors gathered as the moving truck rolled up. She didn't wave goodbye, didn't shout insults. She just kept her head down, eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. Defeated at last. But Jake wasn't done yet. Weeks later, with the pool finally at peace and the house behind Karen sitting empty, Jake got an idea. He opened his backyard every Saturday afternoon to everyone in the neighborhood. Families came. Kids swam. Retirees brought barbecue. The same people Karen had once threatened with fines were now laughing, swimming, and relaxing like never before. Jake even installed a plaque on the fence near the waterline. "Karen's Corner, may she swim forever." It became a running joke. New neighbors asked about it, and the story was told like a legend. The woman who tried to control everything and ended up dunked by her own ego. Jake leaned back in his chair one afternoon, the smell of grilled burgers in the air, the sound of kids splashing in the pool, and Lana beside him holding a lemonade. "I think we finally won," she said. Jake smiled. "No, we didn't win." He gestured toward the crowd. "All of us did."